For sure.
So, Tyler, I'm going to call upon you to come back up and share with us about talent search. What is it? What do we have here in Kentucky that could be um, worked with, providing opportunities across the Commonwealth and beyond? You're up.
I'm going to share my screen and hopefully I don't have the same technical difficulties this time. And B, if you see anything in the Q&A box, if you could just unmute and let me know what that is.
Well,
So this is a map of the United States showing different talent search regions that we had for quite a while. As many of you know, we were a part of the Duke Talent Identification Program region. And talent search, you can see on the left side, it's Dr. Julian Stanley. He was a psychologist at Johns Hopkins University, and he had a student that was very advanced that came to him and was obviously needing additional services that weren't being provided for him. His educators probably thought, oh, he'll be fine on his own. But Dr. Stanley gave him the SAT and he performed exceptionally well. And then Dr. Stanley worked with him to decide what were appropriate services. And for this student, it ended up being enrolling in college early. So he enrolled in Johns Hopkins University. Well, in 2020, Duke Tip closed. And then we had another talent search that closed as well. So you can see the gray here was the part of the United States that had traditionally been served by talent search programs. And with the closures, that opportunity was completely taken away. We had three different talent searches that were still serving students, but there were a whole lot of states that were not being served. So Julia reached out to Susan Asseline at the University of Iowa Bell and Blank Center, and you can see that the University of Iowa, they were doing just a statewide talent search. So they were focusing solely on the state of Iowa. And that's what we talked about. How could we do that for Kentucky to make sure that the closure of Duke Tip did not eliminate these opportunities for students? And we developed a consortium with several different centers at universities across the country. And we meet regularly to talk about what's new in talent search. How can we make sure that we are serving students and using that information still? So this is what the current landscape of talent search looks like. We're working collaboratively with folks. So we're not really looking at regions so much anymore, but we're looking at how can we best serve students. We all offer different kinds of opportunities for students. So there's not a one size fits all. You can see that the newest talent searches that have popped up are here at Baylor in Texas, the Baylor TIP program. We have the Arkansas School for Math, Sciences, and the Arts that has started a program. I think they're officially launching this month out of their pilot phase. And then Title UA at the University of Alabama has started some talent search offerings. And then, of course, the TIP Kentucky program, Talent Identification Program of Kentucky, has started here in Kentucky. So what exactly is a talent identification program? We are very good at recognizing and supporting sports talent, artistic talent, and musical talent. Those are things that seem to be valued and seen as something that we need to foster. But sometimes when we're looking at academic talent, I know that you all see this, we're not necessarily identifying and serving it in the same ways that we might serve these other talent areas. So a talent search program is really looking at identifying and supporting academic talent. And that is our overarching goal of TIP Kentucky. So we have three components that we traditionally talk about with TIP Kentucky. There's an above level assessment that's given, there's programming that comes from that, and then a recognition ceremony that we offer. And I'm not going to show these videos, but we have these available on our website that goes into what is above level testing, how can it be used, and I think we have one that maybe isn't posted just yet, but it looks at who should be taking above level tests. So um, the first component is the above level assessments. When we're looking at this first bell curve here, we see that we have all of these students that are performing at or above the 90th percentile, and you see that it kind of goes down below that. We do not have a strict cutoff for which students can be um, included in the talent search to take the above level assessment. We've heard that some folks go down to the 85th percentile. So if you're thinking that there's a student that's performing well at grade level and you want to see how much above grade level they're ready to do, then give them the above level assessment. We want to make sure that they're not performing low enough that it's going to be too challenging for them and it would stress them out. But we want to make sure that we're opening opportunities for these students that on grade level assessments, they're doing well. We can see they are meeting grade level benchmarks, but those grade level assessments, that's all it's telling us. It's telling us they are able to do that content. Now, if we look at this other bell curve up here, this is the above level assessment. So all of these students that are here, when they are taking the above level assessment, they are scoring at quite a range. So some of them might be scoring at the 25th percentile on the above level assessment, whereas some of them are scoring at the 50th. So they're performing average for those students in a higher grade level, whereas some of them are at the 75th or even the 90th. And depending on where these students are, there's going to be different service options that we need to use to match to their readiness. So some benefits of above level testing, it breaks that academic ceiling for students. So like I said, when we're looking at only grade level assessments, we don't know much about what else they're ready to do beyond just that grade level. It determines the degree of challenge needed by subject. So that second bell chart, we see that some of them are higher, some of them are lower, and we're going to design different service options depending on where those students are performing. It helps inform both educators and families what students are ready to learn, and it provides data to support identifying high ability and high potential learners. So through TIP Kentucky, we are offering services for students between fourth grade and eighth grade. Duke TIP used to offer more grade levels, but most recently, before it closed, it was traditionally focused just on seventh graders. We've opened that up. We've talked a lot about how we think that talent development starts early. We have to make sure that those opportunities are available early to get students in a pathway that they're ready to get to where they need to be. So for the students in fourth through sixth grade, we give the iExcel is an online test developed by the Bell and Blank Center. We administer that at the school. We also have on-campus testing a couple of times a year. So if a student can't make it to the one offered in the school, or if the school's not offering it, then they can contact us and register to test on our campus. And it is 4 subject areas. It's math, science, English, and reading. And that test is designed for students in eighth grade. So when we're giving it to fourth through sixth graders, you can see the above level nature of it. We also give the ACT for students in grades 7 through 8. And of course, that's designed for students primarily in junior and senior year of high school. And it has 4 areas: math, science, English, and reading. We also think that it's very important to provide score interpretations for educators and families. If we just tell you that this student got this cut score on the ACT math section, you may say, well, that's great, but what do I do now? So we have worked with the University of Iowa Bell and Blank Center to provide interpretation reports for these scores. So it looks at the student scores, it compares the scores to other talented students in the same grade, and it gives score comparisons to typical students in the higher grade level. So for iExcel, it's looking at what are score comparisons to eighth graders that were taking that assessment. It also breaks it down by subject area. So you're not looking at just a composite. You're looking at in the four individual subject areas, how did those students perform? We'll see that some students are advanced in maybe math, whereas they're scoring about average or below average in language arts or something like that. So there may not be a student that's scoring well in all areas, and we want to make sure to take that into consideration. It gives recommendations and resources useful for the family based on each of those subject areas. And then it also provides a pyramid of educational options. So we'll look at that here. I know this is maybe a little small on your screen. There's a lot to consider. You see that we have different shapes. So the triangle is for math, the diamond is for science, and the circle is English and reading. And depending on how the student performs, the shape would go in each of these boxes. So thinking about the student I was just talking about, they may be extremely academically talented in math. So we would need to look at grade skipping, mentorship, dual enrollment, subject acceleration by 2 or more years for that student. Whereas they could be down here very academically talented in English and reading. And for them in English and reading, we would look at enrichment, curriculum compacting in that area, extracurricular programs or competitions. So it really depends on the individual subject areas where students are performing, and then looking at how do we support the student best in that subject area. And then the last component that we think about with the recognition is with the recognition. So students that perform well on the above level assessments, we invite to WKU's campus for a recognition ceremony. They'll get a medal and be recognized for that academic talent. And we also talked about programming. So if you just give the assessment, get the score, and you don't do anything with it, then that's not very useful. You want to make sure that you are providing programming opportunities for the students. We talked about how the pyramid of educational options can provide guidance on how to use that in your school system. But we also, as Julia mentioned at the beginning, have programs throughout the year for students. Just looking through this list, I don't think that she mentioned the Doctors Modi Make a Difference Service Learning Opportunity, but it is a program that we have for students that are interested in solving problems in their community. So they may find that there's an issue with homelessness, and they have a project idea that they want to implement to solve that problem. They would apply for this program, and then it's a grant that they can use to then go back and actually implement that program in their community. And we're working on getting that application ready to launch for this academic year. This will be, I think, Joy and B, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this will be our third cycle of the grants for that. And I think that we've talked about the rest of these opportunities. We haven't talked extensively about the Gatton Academy, but we have a panel that's coming up that will talk about that. So we're just getting started. I think that we did a pilot in the fall of 2021. And since then, since we've actually launched, we've had more than 3,600 students who have participated in grades 4 through 8. That represents more than 200 schools and more than 100 school districts in Kentucky. Though we're the Talent Identification Program of Kentucky, we also are open to accepting students from other states that may not be served with talent searches. So we've had students from Georgia, Missouri, Virginia, Texas, Tennessee, Illinois, and Indiana as well. So with that, I'll take any questions. I see, Leslie, you put in the chat, what about the Idea Festival? I did not mention that. So the Idea Festival is hosted in February. I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head.
25th.
It will be February 25th. It's where students will come to our campus. In the morning, they will have some speakers. typically 5 to 6 speakers that talk about what they're working on, and it's meant to be a variety of different innovators in their field to get students thinking about what they can possibly be doing and inspire them to think about new avenues and new interests they might want to explore. And then in the afternoon, we have a variety of minds-on, hands-on activities. It could be a poetry writing workshop. It could be a makerspace. We have a professor from biology that brings insects that students can look at and explore. So it's just a wide variety of options for students.
And Tyler, Leslie had a follow-up about doing one in Louisville. I wasn't aware of one in Louisville.
So the Idea Festival started in Louisville, and it ran for several years, but it has not run for Joya maybe 6 or 7 years.
Yes, you're right.
And I don't know if they are planning to do another one. I've not heard talk of that, but we have not explored doing one in Louisville. We are focusing on our Bowling Green location.
And way back when, there was Idea Festival for young people in Louisville, but I haven't heard of that in a long time.
I see a question here.
Oh.
I believe it is state specific. Will you be able to do this test for out of state as well? For example, in Massachusetts, they unfortunately do not have gifted and talented program. It is not state specific. As I mentioned, we are called the Talent Identification Program of Kentucky, but we are not exclusive to students in Kentucky. So if there is a student in Massachusetts, like you mentioned, that you think would be a great candidate and get a lot out of the talent search, we welcome them. You can send me an email and we can talk about opportunities. The IExcel can be offered in the school, so you would coordinate that with the school to do a test there. If the school is unwilling to do that, then we can talk about different options to be able to find an appropriate proctor and site for that to happen. For the ACT, students take the national test date. So those are offered throughout the country. They would just need to find a test site that's close to them. They would register through Tip Kentucky. We would give them a code, and then they would go to the ACT site and just register like anyone else would. But it is restricted to just the Saturday testing for ACT.
And Tyler, you and I would both kind of smile when we report that it took 2.5 years to get the trademark. So it kind of seems like that's our name and that we need to stick with it.
And then I see that Lori has asked, what is the cost of above level assessment to families/districts? That's a great question. For IExcel, we have a cost of $55 per student. And if the students qualify for free and reduced lunch, we're able to offer that at $25 per student. And then for the ACT, right now our cost is at $95 per student. And that includes, both of those costs include the cost of the test itself, and then also the interpretation reports that come along with that. With IExcel, there are options for schools. So if the school wants to pay for the above level assessment for students, then we have a different registration form for that, where the students aren't asked to pay. If the school wants the students to pay themselves, then we just have on the registration form where they can pay right then. And if there's a school that is wanting to pay for students to take the ACT, we can talk about that as well and get them registered. And Lori also asked, can you share a little bit about how we can recommend students? I think that what I mentioned with looking at those bell curves, there's not a specific cutoff score. So we're not looking at students that are necessarily performing at that 96th percentile we may look at for gifted identification. We're not necessarily looking at the 90th percentile. We're just wanting to find students that we think are performing well at that level and are able to do much more than we're able to measure with grade level assessments, and then use that data in order to serve those students. So I know that's a little bit not a firm answer on how to recommend students and which ones are qualified. But I think we really are just trying to find those students that this information would be beneficial in serving. And then the last question I see here, can the above level test be offered to grade 2 through 3 kids as well? I think that the requirement right now is that the assessment is really designed for 4th through 6th grade students, looking at it as designed for 8th grade students, but for the above level part, we're just looking at 4th through 6th grade students. Anything you want to add with that, Joya?
I think you did it well. So, thank you, Tyler.
Oh,
And
I do see one
Oh,
more question from
ask, go ahead.
NY. Now that the Project Launch Plus grant is over, are you looking to do something else similar? I don't know that we have talked extensively about what our next steps are. We absolutely are continuing with above level assessment and TIP Kentucky, so making sure that we're providing those opportunities. I don't think that we are planning to have the summer programs that come along with Project Launch Plus like we had. That's not to say we won't do something like that in the future. We're definitely continuing with the SCATS program for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students, and the VAMPE program for 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade students during the summer. So those opportunities are still available. But I don't think that we have a specific plan for what's next with Project Launch Plus.
And I would add to that, we are always looking for resources. So if you knew of any funding source that could make Camp Discover available to students at no cost, which the grant did, call us. Let us hear about it.